introduced us, right, to storytelling. So we're going to talk about storytelling in terms through the lens of advocacy. But before we get started, if anybody would like to participate, we're a small group, so it shouldn't be too long of an icebreaker. But I would love to know your name and what is your favorite story or book or movie, right? And when you think of that, think of the thing that was most impactful for you for that. So for me, I'm a horror movie buff, and my favorite movie was A Nightmare on Elm Street. And the reason why I love that film so much is because it had a strong female lead, and she was a shy girl who was able to conquer the bad guy at the end of the story. And it always encouraged me that even though I was shy and quiet, that I could be this strong, powerful woman like Nancy was in A Nightmare on Elm Street. So we can just, you can raise your hand or you can come off mute. And we would love to hear your name and what your favorite story or movie is.
Jay Consiglia here, and I'll just take it up, I guess. I'm not sure if I really have a favorite. There's certainly a lot of different kinds of media I've enjoyed over the years. I think that probably my favorite story is the ones that I write in my free time. But at least for shows that I'm really enjoying right now, I've always been really partial to noir, like film noir. And HBO's Perry Mason is pretty quintessential noir. It's actually quite good. So I've just been enjoying that a lot. But like when I was growing up, I also enjoyed horror movies. And one horror movie I really liked was Alien, in part because it had that extremely strong human female lead, where in Sigourney Weaver, who just, you know, their approach to her character was actually pretty revolutionary for the time. So I really, that movie always has like a special place.
Thank you. I can go. My name is Kate Harwood, and my favorite movie / book story is the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. And I like that because even though like worst case scenario always happens to these 3 siblings, they somehow like figure it out and persevere, and then it's on to the next tragedy, unfortunately, but they always, something good happens in the end. So I just grew up with the book, and then it was a movie that wasn't that strong, but the Netflix series is quite good for the series of Unfortunate Events.
And my name is Lori. I'm trying to think of my favorite movie. But when I was a kid, I remember watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and I love that story because, you know, Rudolph was different, but he had strengths and abilities, and he was just like the other reindeer, but he was able to help Santa out at the end. I don't know. That just came to mind.
Is that the claymation one or the stop motion?
Yes, the claymation.
That one is adorable. Okay, that one has like a special place in my heart too from when I was a little kid. So yeah. Total respect.
Thanks, y'all. The other participant, it just says Galaxy A12 there. Would you like to share your name and maybe a favorite story or movie of yours? You're on mute, honey. Oh, she's really telling us to, and we're missing out. You're on mute.
I don't know Zoom real good. I'm kind of new at Zoom.
It's okay.
But I hear you guys. I'm new at Zoom.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm new at Zoom.
That's okay. Would
So
you like to
carry on,
share
I'm
your
new at
name?
Zoom.
I'm
It's
sorry?
Adrian, and I'm new at Zoom.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Do you have a favorite movie or book that you'd like to tell us?
I can't think of anything just right now. Thank you.
Okay.
That's fair. No pressure.
No pressure.
I'm glad that we know your name.
Yes. So thank y'all. You know, and as we're thinking about these stories, right? What we kind of see almost in every good story is a beginning, a middle, and an end, a conflict, a tension, right? Like we really cherish stories that there is a tension or a conflict that's resolved. So that'll be important as we talk about when we get into testimony. Like as we present our stories, we want to also present what the resolution is, like what the solution would be. So when I do storytelling trainings, I like to say that storytelling is three-dimensional. It's the dimensions that bring storytelling to life. Sometimes the people that kind of get stuck in storytelling that's not as effective, I kind of think of it as two-dimensional, is kind of flat, because you really need the three pieces, the three legs to the stool to hold up a great story. And me and Jay are going to kind of go through each dimension with you to help you be able to craft effective stories for your advocacy. And remember, this isn't just testimony, although we'll be focusing a little bit, we'll be sharing some testimony for us to look at. But, you know, storytelling in advocacy also means talking to legislators, talking at conferences, going and making office visits, sharing with other people as you build coalitions. That's also, those are important places to be able to tell effective stories. So these dimensions are, number one, storytelling and the brain, right? Logical. It's that part of the story, especially with legislative testimony, that adds facts, that really engages the part of our brain that is analytical and thinking about all the reasonable, rational elements of a story. Dimension two is about storytelling and connection, emotion. It will be talking about the emotional language that really adds another layer to a story that gets people really engaged. You know, storytelling is pretty unique among human beings, right? It's what really sets us apart from the rest of the animal kingdom, is that we are storytelling creatures, and we're really hardwired for it. And so the third dimension is storytelling and transformation. So this is where that logical part of storytelling, with its facts, with its research, kind of collides and merges with the emotional connection aspect of storytelling. And when that happens, you reach that third dimension, which brings it all to life, makes it 3D. And that's storytelling and transformation. That's when change happens. So let's dig into this a little bit more. And Jay, why don't you tell us about, because I know a few people that do research as well as you do. You're so good at it. Why don't you share with us that logical part of storytelling? Like, as you crafted your testimony through the several bills that you've testified on, what was your process for digging into that logical part of testimony?
So there's when giving logical testimony or appealing to logic, when you're talking numbers, when you're talking, you know, facts, and, you know, impersonal statistics that are really important but don't really humanize the issue. First thing I do is, you know, for a bill that I am for or against, I'm reading through that bill and I'm trying to understand that bill as much as possible. Not every bill is as straightforward as we would like. So sometimes I have to rely on people outside of myself who are part of my network that maybe understand certain systems better. So I guess I'll go through this with an example. So one of my main issues is community attendance. And when doing research for that bill, I was talking to, experts in that issue area, like my boss, Dennis Burrell, Chase Bearden. They were forwarding me a bunch of different research articles to read, studies, economic analyses, all this stuff, so I could understand the issue from this like bird's eye view. This is how many people in Texas use community attendance services. This is what those services generally look like. This is what it costs. How much cheaper is it compared to someone being in a nursing home? Just getting all those numbers in my head so I can make an argument from this data facts research standpoint. Because the thing is when you're giving testimony on a lot of these issues, it's good to have you don't have a lot of time. Usually it's 2 or 3 minutes. It's good to have somebody that hits with all the data, the facts, and the research from that bird's eye view. And then it's good to have somebody that has those personal connections to the issue. So I do not use community attendance services to manage any of my disabilities. But I'm really good at putting forth numbers and explaining these bird's eye view, big, complicated topics into something that's kind of just small and bite size, and cramming that into 2 minutes. So that's generally how I go about it. When I'm looking at a bill, I'm thinking, how will this positively or negatively impact my community and the people that rely on these services? What can we do to say it's a good bill, say it's a bill that actually assists with getting community attendance services to people? What kind of testimony can I give to further this bill along from a numbers standpoint and kind of attack that argument from all these different angles? Amount of people that have benefits, the economics of it, who have supported the bill in the past, how can I appeal to authority? And sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. I got so into it that I kind of forgot where I was going. But sorry, y'all. So I'm kind of just putting all of those things together to try and present this argument so someone can come up behind me in the testimony order to kind of seal the deal with their personal story and humanize it. Hopefully that answers the question adequately.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love that you bring up a great point too, Jay, is that you can craft, and it's already tough, right? Especially in the Senate when they usually just give you 2 minutes. So you've got to be super concise and impactful. But as we often work in coalitions, we kind of agree to do just that. Like, this person's going to testify to this, and it may be very fact-based and research-based. And then you have other advocates that come up that just share a story. Then you have some advocates that interweave both the facts and the storytelling. It's just, I think it's important that, some people are really great at research and facts, and they don't really feel comfortable telling more emotional, personal stories. And some people, that's their jam. I really love being able to find, you said the word that encapsulates it is humanize, right? Because you've got to have the reason, you got to have the logic there, because I've watched people give testimony, and it was very clear that they didn't understand the bill. They didn't understand the reason, the logic, the facts. They told a great story, right? But you know, you can have great facts, but if you don't hit the emotional aspect of it, it's not going to move legislators to change. But if you don't have the right facts, I mean, they're going to be like, no, that doesn't make sense, right? I am curious, how do you figure out, as you're doing your research to support your argument, right? Like, how do you decide which is the most important piece of data or fact to use?
I think that requires a lot of reading, at least from a data facts research side of things, because when you see certain concepts repeated over and over across the various pieces you're reading, it could be a news article, it could be, you know, an economic analysis, it could be a research paper, it could be a study. You start to kind of get a sense of not just commonalities and major bullet points that could be included in your argument, but also, you know, being able to establish that what you're saying actually has a data backup can be really important. So you're not just going up there and when you have a good source for you or the argument that you're making, you know, that's going to make legislators look at you and be like, oh, you actually know what you're talking about. You're not just making stuff up. So, and I actually wanted to add to something about testimony sequences that we kind of started touching on earlier, which is for really big, complicated issues, like community attendant issues, you can't always necessarily put all the data, facts, and research into a 2-minute testimony. So we have in the past had one person talk about, you know, what an activity of daily living even is and what that can look like for 2 minutes. Then we had one person talk about, you know, the base wage and what that actually means for being able to recruit and retain an attendant. Then we had someone that literally just talked about turnover. We had somebody that was a local health agency owner that had a tiny little business that was providing community attendant services, and they talked about how the base wage affects their business. So, you know, sometimes don't expect yourself to be able to fully condense, you know, an issue into 2 minutes. Like, it's not reasonable. If you have an office visit and they're willing to meet with you for 10 to 20 minutes, you really can start hitting everything. You know, the base wage does this. If we raise it, it'll be able to do this. If we don't raise it, things are going to get worse. And this is why you should care about this. And I think that, you know, as many advocates are people with lived experience, it's important to be able to go into the office or to a hearing and be like, this is the summary of the issue, and this is how it affects me personally. I think that people with disabilities make the best disability advocates because we can do that. And the stories that we tell are in our bones. So, sorry, I get off track a lot. I get excited.
No, I'm following you, and I love that you said that, right? Like it's in our bones, right? Like it's in us, and right. I want to use that as kind of a moment to kind of transition into that next dimension of emotional connection, right? That's the other part of storytelling, the second part. And you just, like, we felt that when you said that, right? Like we felt emotional suddenly. You were like, I get excited, I get into this, and we can hear that in emotional language, and that is such an integral part of being able to tell an effective story, right? Because you gave us some good facts. You're giving the legislator or, you know, someone else you're educating good facts. And then you breathe more life into it with a bit of more personal experience and with that emotive language. I tell folks, you know, don't overdo it to where it's too much, right? We know what that sounds like when people use too many adjectives, but finding really descriptive, vivid, emotionally impactful words to use. Word choice is so important when we're telling stories that are effective and when we're trying to tell persuasive stories, because I mean, I feel like that's what, you know, narrative in legislative testimony is. It is a type of persuasive speech. It's kind of a persuasive storytelling. And, you know, once the reason why emotional language is so important is because I'll use an example. See, I'm fixing to tell a story. So, and suddenly, trust me, I don't know if y'all have ever been in meetings when people are going on and about this very data-driven stuff, and then someone goes, "Let me tell you a story." It does kind of perk you up a little bit. I am paying a little bit more attention, and because as humans, we're looking for ourselves in those stories. But recently, we had some testimony about medical transportation for the ladies that are incarcerated in our prisons. And as a woman with lived experience in that system, medical transportation is horrific. You're in these terrible old metal buses just after surgery, elderly women with disabilities. It is just an absolute nightmare, and I won't get into it here. But when we started doing testimony, we had all decided, hey, we're going to keep it to 4 or 5 impactful stories. You hit the thing about the handcuffs, you hit the thing about surgery, you hit the thing about strip searches. And, you know, we kind of coordinated those stories around, which was a little bit harder in terms of facts and logic, because this was one of those bills where and I see this a lot, not just in the criminal justice system, but Jay, you probably see it in the systems that you work. It's the consumer, it's the resident, it's the participant trying to get legislators to understand that things are not working the way the state agency says. And it almost feels like a battle of he said, she said, because we're going off of people's experiences that are hard to capture in data sometimes, right? You know, and so they were we kind of lost them for a minute because some testimony went on a little too long. But then my friend got up there and vividly described what it was like to be strip searched during those transportations while being sick or disabled, because she herself had been through it vividly. And she said, I want to prepare you now that, you know, I'm not trying to be, you know, obscene or anything like that. I just need you to really understand what we're talking about. And it was you know, I saw people's eyes just like open up and like, whoa, like, wow. Because it was descriptive, it was emotional. And when people can see themselves in your stories through emotion, now you've caught them. Jay, what has been your experience as you hear people tell more, you know, less data driven, and maybe they're focusing more on their emotional, personal story? What are the ways that you've seen that go well, and what are the ways that you've seen that maybe not necessarily go so well so far?
Well, so for the issues that I don't have personal experience with, I approach them very much from like that data-driven like angle. But for issues that I'm advocating for that are near and dear to me, so things like non-medical switching, copay accumulators, expansion of the medical cannabis program here in Texas to include more conditions, you know, that's when I start telling my own personal stories. And when that goes well, and I think it's gone well a good couple times, even though, frankly, it's kind of tough to get up in front of the Texas Legislature and start sharing intimate details about my disease experience. You know, I've had Crohn's disease for 16 years. So I have a lot of stories related to, you know, topics of healthcare access. And I think it goes well when, and Jen, you kind of mentioned this earlier, you know, when someone makes their testimony viscerally impactful, just enough for the legislators to get a taste of why it's so important without necessarily like really hitting them over the head with it. Because I think there's kind of a balance with it, because you know, I have a lot of like gruesome details that I really could include in some of my testimony, but I know that if I do too much, they'll pull back from me. So you want that kind of balance. And when the testimony that I did that I like, that Jen's going to be sharing later, you know, I'm talking about why it's important for people with chronic illness to be able to access their medication that they're stable on. And, you know, I don't fully elucidate what a Crohn's flare looks like, but I do hint at why it's bad. I don't hit them with the full 10-minute like breakdown of all the terrible things that I had to deal with, but I give them just enough where they're like, oh, wow, that's actually something we shouldn't let happen. And I allow myself to lean into just enough vulnerability where I'm connecting with them. And often when I'm giving these emotional testimonies, you know, when I talk about stuff that we know in our bones, you know, when you're talking about an issue that you've been living for over a decade, that comes across when you're talking about it, especially if you know that topic so well that you can go up there and you can look them in the eye when you're talking about it. I know that not everybody is comfortable with public speaking and being able to do that, but it's something that definitely can help when you look them in the face and make that kind of connection. And they can see you as, you know, that person that really cares about this and needs this bill to either pass or not pass. You're not just a stats person, you're a human being that's fully invested in this particular thing. So I know that's not a very straightforward answer, because I think that giving testimony is not the easiest thing to do. You gotta find the right balance, because I have seen some testimony where someone gets so fired up that they kind of lose sight of what they're even trying to talk about, and they kind of go off their own narrative arc, or they get so heated that they start like yelling into the mic, and that makes legislators defensive, because they don't like being yelled at, they don't like being called names. So and it can be hard, because if you really are passionate about something, or they're putting up a bill that really would affect your life negatively, it can be hard not to yell at them. But finding that balance, remembering that these legislators are human beings, like trying to connect with them that way.
No, Jay, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, and you said some very key words here. Vulnerability, right? Like when we move into that more emotional aspect of storytelling at the ledge, vulnerability is a signal to another human being that I trust you. I trust you with my story. I trust you to not rip into me right now. It also shows a sense of being very brave, because you might rip into me, right? Like you might have had legislators say some really tough things in response after I've shared, or someone that I, you know, am close to and passionate about an issue shares, and it wasn't safe, you know, it didn't feel safe, right? And so vulnerability is a signal that I'm brave and that I trust you, right? So what are you going to do with that? And I think this leads us into that third dimension, which is transformation. And a key part of being able to combine both our facts and logic and our emotional, personal stories, and have them merge into this transformation that creates change, you said it. It has to be balanced. It is a delicate balance of just enough logic and just enough emotion, right? Because, you know, you mentioned oversharing, right? Like that like imagine when a stranger comes up to you and overshares something deeply personal. We feel weird, we feel awkward, we feel like, because that's, you know, we know that if somebody has shared too much, they're trying to establish a level of intimacy or trust with us that is not warranted. So we are immediately on guard as human beings. So you don't want to push people away and be off-putting, right? And that's, you know, like you said, when people lose sight, I always tell people to either write their testimony down or practice it in advance. Don't just go up there and fly off the cuff, because I've seen it happen. You've seen it happen where people get lost in their emotion, or they get stumbled on the facts and they don't do that merging and that transformation. Because the whole point of balancing this perfectly is so that the legislators or whoever we're telling our story to is able to infuse themselves. They're able to see themselves or their family or someone they care about in the stories we're telling. And that's when it transforms. It creates a connection and an intimacy that transcends that flat, you know, effect of just facts, or that, you know, people can tell emotional stories, but if they don't have stories have to have a point, right? Like the stories that we all talked about that we enjoyed, whether it was Rudolph overcoming his fear and being able to be the hero, whether it was, I love Alien and Aliens. Sigourney Weaver, her poster was on my wall because I love strong female leads, because society tells us we can't be. So, you know, she overcomes the alien. Nancy overcomes Freddy Krueger. Like, there is a point to the story. And I know that all of us have been in situations where someone has told us a story and we're like, why did you tell me that? Like, what was the point of that, right? A story has a point, and it utilizes those first two dimensions to be able to really get that person to understand, right?
Yeah,
so I would
be persuasive with it.
Right. And it is such a balance. I feel, you know, I'm the type of person that I get embarrassed really easily, and it's not even related to me, like other people and other, you know, that other person may not be embarrassed, but like I feel that kind of stuff really deeply. So when I've seen testimony and storytelling, even in offices or in group meetings that were too much, right? Like you said, like way oversharing. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about take that data point. So Jay's got this great research in this. There's a piece of this data that I found that really, really kind of nails it for me, right? And so then I look at that data and I think, what is the most emotionally impactful personal story that I have that can embody that fact, right? And that's where you take those two dimensions and kind of, because people will tell me, well, how do I know what story to tell? Well, look at the bill, like Jay told us, look at the bill, really understand it, really read it, do your research, and what speaks to you that's most important for you and your community, and then think of the most emotionally impactful story you can tell around that piece of data, right? Do you want to share anything else before I pop up the videos?
I think that's good. You're riffing real well off of my nonsense. So I've been in this job for actually a year as of this month, whereas Jen is like the veteran here and like can just like explain this whole process way better than I can. So I'm very green. So I'm glad that you're picking up everything I'm putting down.
Yeah, hey, you're putting it down well, my friend. You really are. So we're gonna say a thoughtful energy thought prayer that I share the screen quickly. I don't, you know, when I'm in Zoom meetings, I'm never the one operating and hosting, because I don't always do that well, but we will try it.
You got this.
We shall try it. I want to pull up yours first so we can talk about it. Let's see.
So you pull up the video first and then you hit the screen share button and you should be able to see it in the little box.
Okay, share sound. Let me make sure. I know that one time I messed that up and didn't do that right. Okay. Can you see it? Is it there, Jay?
Yeah, I see it. You're
Awesome.
You're gonna want to maximize it.
Okay. You
And
still see it, right?
Yeah, hold on, let's maximize it. Yeah, we can see it. Hopefully hopefully it doesn't get too pixelated, but we can try it.
Okay, so I'm gonna hit play and tell me if you can hear it.
Members, are there any questions for the witness?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Cool.
If not, thank you for being here. This time the chair calls up Jay Consiglia, Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, and self testifying for the bill.
It's a little choppy, but that's all right.
I hope I didn't butcher that too bad.
It's all right, I'm used to it. Actually, you did great.
All right, you may proceed then.
I'm Jay Consiglia. I'm with the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, and I'm speaking today for HB 999. I am a person with Crohn's disease and osteoporosis. I got Crohn's disease at 19, and because of my treatment for Crohn's disease, I ended up being diagnosed with osteoporosis at 32. Wow. For Crohn's disease, I have been relying on biologics to keep me in remission for the past 16 years. My biologic without copay assistance is $700 to $1,000 every infusion, depending on the facility I get it from. My osteoporosis medication, the copay for that is $500. So my medications without assistance cost more than my rent every month. And you know, these medications, extremely specialized. While there's a number of different Crohn's medications on the market, they're not interchangeable. The prevailing wisdom of IBD specialists and gastroenterologists is when you find a medication that works for your Crohn's disease, you stay on it until it doesn't work or you die. So, you know, if I no longer can afford to pay for my Inflectra, there are cheaper drugs on the market, but there's no guarantee that they'll even work. And while I'm in that experimental phase for a new drug, I may not be able to go back to Inflectra if I hit that inflection point and end up hospitalized, because when you get off a biologic, your body can start to produce antibodies to that particular drug. So I have to stay on it. And I have moderate to severe Crohn's disease, so if I'm not treated, I'm going to end up how I was when I initially was diagnosed, where I was in the hospital dying. I had 17 centimeters of ulcerated bowel and an abscess the size of a softball. So, you know, for me, I can't just not pay because I'll just end up back there with moderate to severe Crohn's disease. So, you know, I'm just a disability advocate for a living, so I don't make a whole lot of money. And I can't be essentially paying my rent plus double that every month and expect to be able to stay afloat. So copay accumulator programs are extremely detrimental to people, to myself, and then also people like me. So I'd really appreciate 999 continuing to gain traction and hopefully getting reported favorably from this committee.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any questions for you. Members, are there any questions? If not, good luck to you. Thank you for testifying.
Okay, Jay, now I got to let me see if I can get back to my other screen. Boom, I did it. I did it.
You're doing great.
Oh, man. Hey, that was good testimony. And I just want to draw some attention to some of the stuff that we've all already talked about, right? That detail, right? That emotional language, that descriptive language. First of all, you were vulnerable. You shared some really personal stuff about your history. When you said that abscess was the size of a softball, like that gave a visual, right? Like I could see some of their heads kind of move. I mean, I know the video was not super great, but you can see reaction, right? Like, because that gave them a visual. when you said this is, detrimental, this is extremely detrimental to people like me. Like you continued to humanize the issue. So how did you feel before and after your testimony?
Even just watching it is just all nerves. Frankly, when I stopped giving testimony that particular time, I was beating myself up because there was so much more I wanted to talk about. But I was lucky because Chase was at that hearing too, and he gave testimony after me. I think the person after, and he got to pick up a lot of the points from the top-down view, those more data-driven logic points that I wanted to bring up, but frankly didn't have the time, and I needed to kind of encapsulate my little story and not meander. So because once you start meandering in front of legislators, like it gets so tough. But so I always come off those things a bundle of nerves, and I always think about stuff that I could do better. But I was really grateful that Chase was there, and he started talking about benefits of employers having their employees be able to afford their medications. And so really just painting the issue is not just patients against insurance companies and employer costs, it's actually employers and patients against insurance companies who, don't count copay assistance towards someone's deductible or out-of-pocket max. So really nice to have other people there to kind of pick up where I left off. And frankly, if y'all ever give testimony in the Capitol on one of your key issues, most likely one of CTD's employees are going to be there too. And we can always, if there's something like, man, I really wish I would have brought this up, and I feel like my testimony is not complete without it, someone can literally reference your testimony and then be like, and by the way, you should also think about this in the context of so-and-so's testimony. So that's what I thought of after.
Yeah, well, it was great. And that's a great point too, that you added, is that, we can always and I've done that in testimony, earlier when Maggie said, or earlier when, the lady before me had said, that's always a great way to continue like the thread, right? Well, I got one more video and then we can open up to some questions if anybody has any. And here we go again. I think I know what I'm doing now, Jay.
Yeah, it's your turn, Jen. I get so embarrassed when I watch my testimony.
I know, me too. I usually turn the sound off so I don't have to hear it, but we'll hear it. We'll hear it this time.
I will answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, are there any questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. The chair calls Jennifer Toon, representing the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, and self, who's registered for the bill. Can you please state your name, whom you represent in your position on the bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee members. My name is Jennifer Toon. I'm representing the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities and myself. I am here in favor of this bill. As a person with lived experience in the justice system, I know the importance of redemption. In 1994, I was 15 years old when I was given a 20-year sentence with eligibility for parole after 10. Now, this was a tough sentence, but at least I had hope. It was nothing compared to many of the teenage girls who I was incarcerated alongside with. These girls, who are now middle-aged, are still working on sentences that range between 50 to 70 years. I know their stories intimately, stories of childhood abuse, undiagnosed mental health problems, and desperation. I know their stories well because those are my stories. Youth who receive the harshest punishments in the criminal justice system are those who have the highest level of vulnerability. Study shows that prior to committing an offense, these children have witnessed violence in their homes and in their communities and experienced trauma such as physical and sexual abuse. Almost 2 decades of research show that very few of these children go on to commit crimes as they get older. They grow out of behavior that is often a product of chaotic and traumatic childhood experience and begin to develop normal adult impulse control. And we also know that long-term incarceration of these children increases their risk for early development of chronic illnesses and disabilities. They also become institutionalized, having trouble thinking and acting independently because they were forced to conform to the institution for survival. Upon release, they then become dependent on public programming and are most likely to reside in shelters or transitional housing. HB 686 would allow kids a chance to move past their childhood mistakes and develop a meaningful adult life on the outside. While the state is responsible
Sorry, it's the way it's recorded.
for making sure that they are accountable for their actions, it must also itself be held accountable for ensuring that children have a reasonable opportunity for rehabilitation and a return to society. What I came here today was to tell you that we were never ever the super predators of the 1990s, children who pseudo-scientific research claimed were beyond reach or without remorse. Data proved that inaccurate. My own success and the quiet, persevering spirit of the girls who are now women, who I left behind those gates, that proves that wrong. The super predator theory of the early 90s is a thing of the past. Yet the children and the families and the communities it affected the most still continue to be harmed by its legacy. With HB 686, legislators are now tasked to usher in the hope of redemption to those of us who were told that there was none. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, are there any questions?
So that bill was a bill that would change parole eligibility for children that were convicted in the early 90s. We were told that we were super predators and giving outrageous large sentences, and many of the girls that I knew are still incarcerated. That bill is supposed to go to the floor soon, so this session. But that was my first testimony, very first time ever giving testimony, and I prepared in advance. I tried to, take the training that I'd received from the Hogg Fellowship and from Dennis and from Jolene and Chase, and really try to weave in a personal narrative with vulnerability, with facts. It remains my favorite testimony. I still get kind of teary and choked up thinking about it, because I sat through that whole hearing listening to facts and data, and nobody with lived experience until I got up. So anyway, I know that we're super close to 6:30, and this was just an hour, but we did start a little late. I would like to open it up to anybody on the call that has questions about testimony or storytelling, or how do you register, or any questions that you might have about sharing your story in advocacy.
Quite a bunch.
No, it's I'm around advocates all day, and we love to talk. We love to talk.
Also, if you can't think of any questions right now, you can always follow up afterwards. I'm pretty sure that y'all have our emails, but if not, I can send emails to y'all, or put my email in the chat or whatever, in case you have questions later, or would like to talk more about this at another time. We're available to you. So, we're not putting anybody on the spot.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that you got to hear us talk for a while. And if there's anything that y'all wanted to share, you're more than welcome to do so. Like Jay said, if you prefer to do that in an email or a phone call, or join us at other trainings, we would love to have you there as well. Well, Jay, do you have any parting words as we wrap it up this evening?
I would say that for people that are looking to get involved in advocacy, specifically legislative advocacy, I want everyone to understand that it is a learning curve and that you're not expected to be perfect, like right away. You know, if you decide to give testimony or meet with a legislator, or even write an email, it doesn't have to be perfect. I think what's most important is showing that you're for or against something, and you know, the person you're trying to reach out to understanding that there is support or opposition for whatever you're reaching out about. And that, you know, if you give testimony and you flub it, I've flubbed testimonies before, it's not the end of the world. You know, you can always do better next time, and generally your testimony is not what's going to make or break something. So I don't know, I just wanted to allay that anxiety, because I know a lot of people that are looking to get into legislative advocacy are spooked that they're gonna do a super bad job, or that everything has to be perfect right away. And it's a process. You'll feel this stuff out. You'll get a sense for it. And frankly, hearing us talk about it, it doesn't fully illustrate kind of how to go about it. I think probably the best advice I can give is, when you know there's a hearing about a bill that you're passionate about in an issue area that's near and dear to you, watch what people are saying and kind of just listen to what they have to say, and just kind of try to absorb that, and just, what do they get right that's within your experience? What did they get wrong? How can you, where can you fill the gap in this discussion? What's not being brought up that you think would add to the discussion? You know, just stuff to kind of think about. I think that figuring out where there are gaps and where your story isn't being represented already by the people giving testimony really helps motivate you to give testimony or to reach out to a legislator, because nothing motivates you quite like anger and not being represented in an issue, or, you know, an issue is being discussed and the people that are talking about it, they don't get it at all. And it's just, you know it way better than they do. And just, you know, kind of, I'm going to be honest, anger is what gets me up there most of the time. So, so yeah, if you want to get involved, don't sweat it. Like, it's a process, and maybe listen into some hearings or see what other people are saying about an issue and see how you can contribute, what new perspectives you can add. That's my 2 cents. My closing 2 cents. What about you, Jen?
I think that's good. That's good 2 cents to share, because, you know, when I started, I felt like I wasn't qualified. I felt like, who am I to come up into this building and say these, you know, things in front of important people? And, you know, it's been a journey to understand that that building belongs to all of us. Those people represent us. And they're just people. And nothing, you're absolutely right. There's nothing more frustrating than to listen, like I did in the testimony you just saw, to sit there and hear people talking about kids that was once me, right? Like, and talking like they understood, and I'm the one with the experience. So there is no right or wrong necessarily. There are some better ways to share your story. There's some ways that maybe need some work, but the most important thing is always knowing that your voice matters. And it just takes practice. And those of us that do it all the time still get nervous and still fret and worry over, did I say the right thing or did I look weird? You know, I do it all the time. But I thank y'all for being here. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Lori, for your wonderful comments in the chat, and Kate and Adrian for hanging out with us and talking about storytelling. So yeah, hit us up anytime. Yes, did you want to say something? I saw you come off mute.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you again for this great training.
You're absolutely welcome. I do love stories, and I love sharing the things that I've learned with folks if it, if it helps them on their journey. I love that. I love self-advocates, so please reach out to us or CTD anytime, and please keep coming back for more trainings. We're going to have more trainings as we go. So
are y'all gonna email the like your phone number, contact information if I do have questions? When I do have questions, yeah.
I'm sure that Laura's probably going to send our wonderful dynamic communications director, but we'll put our email in the chat now. So if that's helpful.
Yeah, I can do that real easy. Because like, I know that a lot of people, when they're thinking about giving testimony or even just emailing comments or submitting comments, they like to have someone look it over, and we can help look stuff over if anyone's got nerves about it. And that's my email address. I'm trying to get Jen's.
Oh, I'm typing it. I still use one. I don't type very fast.
And if that's because that's just text you would have to copy paste. If that's not accessible, we can, if we have your email, we can email you follow up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if there's any sort of accommodations that are ever needed for correspondence, let us know, because we want to make sure that whatever we're offering is accessible. So yeah, that's pretty much all of our stuff.
Yeah,
we did it.
So I really enjoyed this, you guys. It was a small group, but I really did enjoy it. So thank you for being with us, and everybody have a lovely evening. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.